Thank you, Sarah. We're now live on YouTube for anyone that can't make it this evening. Just to repeat that, we have apologies from Fiona Barrow, Lisa Merriweather and Ben Still. Ben is joining us on Zoom, I believe. The first thing we need to do is vote to accept those apologies. Can anyone propose that? Andy, thank you. Seconded by Anita. Does everyone agree? Thank you very much. Some things I need to run through first. Thank you for joining us. This is the meeting of Frome Town Council. I'm Sarah Butler and I'm chairing the evening's meeting. So we've got people online and we have people here in the room. For those here, just a couple of housekeeping things. The emergency exit is over there. The assembly point is in the far side of the car park. Toilets at the end of the corridor on the right, and there's an accessible toilet to the right of the lift. Tea and water, please do keep yourself hydrated. It's a very sticky evening. Peter is clerking, Laura is managing the slides and taking the minutes. Sarah and Rachel will manage the questions board, participant settings, and the general IT situation. We're recording and live streaming on YouTube. For those attending via Zoom, please use the yellow hand for questions, and for everyone else, please ask questions through the Q&A board. So we've done apologies for absence. And then we need to approve the minutes from the last meeting on the 18th. Declaration of interests first. Any councillors to declare any interest in anything that's on the agenda this evening? No, okay, that's good. And then on to approving the minutes from the last meeting of the 18th of May. Thank you, Anita, for proposing and Mark for seconding. All those in favour of approving those? That's a majority. Thank you. Okay. So agenda item 2 is questions and comments from the public and councillors. And I believe that Rachel has got something to kick us off with on that.
Yes, we've got a question from a member of the public, Anthony Bowering, who says, could I ask when the council is going to challenge Avon and Somerset Police on their lack of presence in Frome? We have a serious antisocial behaviour problem with people riding pit bikes and quad bikes unregistered around the town. Frome used to be a well-policed town when it was an Avon and Somerset training town, but since they closed the police station, we haven't seen a single police person walking the beat.
And I think Nick has a response to that.
Yes, good evening. Nick Dove, Councillor for Keyford Ward. Yeah, thank you, Anthony, for your message, your question rather. I guess to put it into context, I meet with Paul Wynne, who's the town clerk, and the local police team once a month to discuss ongoing issues in the town. The most important thing, I think, is to urge anyone is to report any crimes to the police. It's important to understand that the police can only respond to incidents that are reported to them. They do patrol the town regularly. There is a dedicated neighbourhood team that is based in Frome and does work out of Frome. And there's also response teams that come out to cover 999 and other calls. As far as there being fewer police than there have been in the past, that's a fact. I mean, in 2009, the government cut police numbers quite savagely. So many fewer numbers available to police forces to deploy. And amongst the first cuts that were undertaken were to neighbourhood teams who were seen as less essential, weren't part of the 999 response. However, it is really, really important to understand that crime and antisocial behaviour is low in Frome. Anthony, if you're interested, there's something called Most Similar Forces data you can look at on the Home Office site, which will show you what's happening on a national basis, comparing other forces that have a similar size and makeup to Frome, to Avon and Somerset. And they will show you that the incidence of antisocial behaviour and crime we are quite low down that league table. Just to reiterate, what's really, really important is you report any incidents of antisocial behaviour or crime, use the online method. That's the most efficient way, unless it's obviously a 999 matter. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Any other comments on that? Thank you. And then Sarah? Okay. Over to you, Anthony.
Raise my hand.
Anthony, can you hear us?
I've actually raised my hand on the webinar.
Okay.
Yeah, can you hear us, Anthony?
I can, yeah.
Would you like to
Go ahead.
speak?
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying about the neighbourhood policing team, but I mean, response to 999 calls in Frome can be up to an hour. Do we really think that with the £2.3 million we pay Avon and Somerset Police a year, that's a good response time?
Nick?
Anthony, I mean, frankly, no, you would hope. I mean, police forces have a target to respond to 999 calls in 15 minutes. Unfortunately, because of cuts, because of the size of the county, because of other calls on resources, because of other incidents that happen, that isn't always achieved. Again, those figures of, you can look at the success rate in terms of how police forces reach or don't reach their targets. There are lots of league tables on the Home Office website for you to look up. Of course, it's disappointing and sometimes very frightening when police don't arrive when you call 999 for genuine emergencies. But it's not something that is done deliberately by the local police. It's not a policy decision to not attend. And they will do their best. But I just urge you to keep reporting incidents, keep reporting crimes. Every couple of weeks, what happens is that the local police inspector will go to a meeting at Avon and Somerset Force headquarters and ask for additional resources to come to the areas that they are responsible for. And of course, the people who get the additional resources are those that have the highest amount of reported crime or antisocial behaviour in their area. So I'd urge you, please, if you witness incidents, to make sure you report them.
I mean, I must admit, I have reported these incidents before, and I find that whilst I have had a visit from the neighbourhood policing team this week, I think that's mostly because I've made several complaints about it. I don't think it's due to normal policing. But I still maintain that for £45,000 a week, you need to see more than just 2 PCSOs in the town.
Mel?
Yeah, just back at you, Anthony. Yeah, I agree. It would be nice to see. I was in town today and I saw 4 police officers and a PCSO. It can depend on shift patterns. They work a system where obviously they have to have time off after they work 12-hour shifts and so on. So it's a challenge. I'm very happy to discuss your particular issue with you outside the meeting. I think we've met before, if you like, on Facebook, but you can find me on the Frome Town Council website. I'd be keen to talk about it and share my past experience of dealing or working in the police.
Thanks, Nick. Mel?
Thanks, Nick. Nick's obviously got a lot of knowledge in these matters, and he tried to answer this question as much as possible. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't schedule the correct police representatives to come down to a future council meeting, and then Anthony and others, if we advertise it properly, can actually ask them the questions, because until they hear things like what Anthony's just said, then it's hidden to them. So I don't see why we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't be responsible for answering for other people in that level of detail.
Okay, thanks, Mel. Richard, did you have your hand up?
Just a quickie. Sorry. Just interested in where we're at with the sort of handing over of assets and claiming assets back to the town council from the district and the old county council. I know that those are ongoing discussions, so you probably can't give me any definite answers, but hopefully we're still trying to grab a few things back.
Max, I suspect, has got some answers there.
Yes, but probably not the kind of progress you would want, Richard. I think the reality is what we're trying to do is to create a list of things that we would ask for from both the outgoing Somerset County and soon to be defunct Mendip District Council. But they have to kind of fit with our strategy. We're not just after grabbing anything that we possibly can, because we want to stay kind of true to our role as a council, really, as a fairly small champion, advocate, catalyst, connector, all of those sorts of things, rather than do an awful lot of service take on. The other issue really is I'm not sure it's quite clear really from the county's point of view what assets they're kind of currently talking about. And certainly given that we've just had a discussion about police, that certainly won't be one of them. Yeah, we're on with it. We're trying to construct a kind of proposition for the county, which both encompasses things like early help and all of the work that we do around children and young people and older people, and trying to kind of move to a model where more early work is done and more preventative work is done on the one hand. And then on the other hand, we're also trying to identify really key assets that, were they to be transferred to us, we could make a far better job of them than is currently made. So watch this space. We'll be coming up with that proposition in the next couple of months, I think, and trying to work that up into a business case, which we hope that the county will find irresistible.
Is that okay, Richard? Jill, did you have your hand up? Yes. Just one or two items local to me in that microphone.
I think, no, I think my voice, oh, it won't. Okay, right. Okay, can I just start off by thanking the council once again for giving us the permission to have the Jubilee party in our open space. It went off very well, although we did have a slight drizzle and a bit of a rain, but we did have plan B in our neighbour's garage, but it worked very well, so thank you. And we had 25 residents from Foundry Barton, which is really good because some people hadn't met others. And so, as the Queen said, it was a togetherness afternoon and it was lovely. I'm going to talk about roughly the silver birch trees behind the gated area in the open space. One has died completely and has not produced leaves this year. It needs to come out, and also 2 others are not looking very well. Regarding the wildlife planting that went on underneath, it didn't really work because it is too shaded, it didn't get the sun, and it is now just a bed of weeds. So when the rangers came up, as 2 of us suggested that it was sort of planted up with like bluebells, make it more of a spring bluebell wood, because with the canopy of the trees, it's no good for a wildlife garden. My neighbour Rosie, who has been up here on 1 or 2 occasions, has got a magnolia in a tub, and she approached one of the rangers whether it could be planted as our Jubilee tree in that area, in the grassed area. And as I said, she spoke to Tony and she would, pass the message on, but I'm telling you about it now. Perhaps it can be sort of planted out, obviously, when this hot weather's passed. Yeah. Right, that's to do with our open space. Can I just say that the farmers market in Frome at the Cheese and Grain finished on Saturday? Did you know all that? They are well, Frome didn't know that. The customers into the farmers market did not know that. And they told us because the rents had been raised too high and they are going into the marketplace. Well, on the sloping pavement. And where are the stallholders going to be able to park to unload their produce? And what's going to happen in the winter when the weather is not as good?
Rachel, we'll come back on that.
Oh,
William.
is that better?
Yeah.
Lovely. Jill, we've been working with them to help them in a number of ways. They've had issues over the last 6 months. Cheese and Grain have also been working with them as well. So it's not a case that they've been abandoned by them either. It has been Somerset Farmers Market's decision to move on to the Royal Cross.
Right.
For a number of reasons, not least visibility. So they're hoping that actually being visible in the centre of the town will really improve their.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, that farmers market is now been going for 24 years.
Yeah.
And numbers have fallen over the years, and they have fallen obviously since COVID.
Yeah.
And on Saturday, there were very few customers really, and the stalls are pretty light as well. So perhaps, okay, let's give it a go in the marketplace, see how it works. Also, there's a caged off area in the Mendip car park, small car park. Is that for electric recharging points? Why is there a large area caged off?
Yes.
For electric charging points, right? Thank you very much. We didn't know that. Has Chris Stringer's job been advertised yet? Please.
Can we use that one on the staff update later on? Yes, can we park that until the staff update that Laura's going to do at the end of the
Right,
agenda?
okay. My spies have been out. Yellow lines have been awash in Frome lately, but they've not been in Foundry Barton or Henley Way. And this planning application still ahead, 5 years on. Okay, thank you very much. I've had my say.
Thank you, all very good points. Thanks for updating us.
Thank you.
Anything else urgent before we move on to the next agenda item? Mel, can you keep it tight? Yes, very good, good item. Let's crank some air through the room. Thank you. Okay, if that's all, there's no one else on the notice board, Rachel? No, okay, brilliant. We'll move on to agenda item 3, and that is 15 minutes for Paul from Mayday Saxon Bell. Oh, just stand it here, that'll be great. Laura, are there slides with this one? Yeah. Do you want the slide, Bifala?
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me like that? Right, thanks. So yeah, I've got 15 minutes, so I'll try and stick to that.
If you have a 2-minute warning.
That'd be very helpful, thank you. And I guess going to try and cover 2 areas. So first of all, giving a bit of an overview of, our plan for Saxon Vale and who we are, and then an update on, how things are going and where we're up to and next steps. So let's get started. So first of all, who are we? So we're Mayday Saxon Vale. We were incorporated in spring last year as a not-for-profit social enterprise, a company limited by guarantee. So most importantly, that means we've got no shareholders and we've got nowhere to distribute profits. All of those would retain within the company. And we've only got one objective, which is to develop the site you can see there, the Saxon Vale site, for the benefit of the community of Frome. And in doing so, we're hoping that we can also provide a bit of a model, a new way of developing areas within towns that maybe other places could take up, and we'll talk about that a bit more later on. And importantly, our partners in that project are Stories, and they're a socially responsible development company, been going about 4 years, and they're made up of some founders who have left the corporate sector, where they were, I guess they'd come to the conclusion that the current system was broken, and the developments that they were part of weren't quite, leaving the legacy for the communities within which they were in situ. So they've got huge amounts of experience, and you can see there a picture of the King's Cross development, and that's what the CEO was partially responsible for. So they know how to deliver at scale, and they've got access to the financing that we need. They're established as a B Corp corporation, and you can see kind of what they think some of their USPs and what they focus on the left-hand side. And really the most important thing is they're not in it to maximize profit. They're in it aligned with us on maximizing the social value that we can deliver through a development in Saxon Vale. So I'll talk a bit about, overall, what's the scheme intended to deliver. But I think this slide kind of talks to, the central focus, the central drive behind it. And we can see here the blue area is the Saxon Vale site within the wider town centre. And I think it's maybe at least 25% of that town centre. And it is the last chance to expand the town centre ever. So if it's going to be developed, then we need to make sure that it's developed in the right way, and that it delivers what Frome needs both now and strategically in the future. And it was historically, and has been for hundreds of years, the employment centre of Frome. So that's kind of front and centre also therefore in our plan and our thinking. So, we did a public presentation and we spent an hour talking about the plan. So I'm going to talk about it, in relative brief and just talk about these kind of key points. But obviously we're always welcome any invitation to get around and talk about the plan in more detail at any time with anyone. So, front and center again, per that point at the top, is that it is a balanced mixed use town centre extension. And the current Acorn scheme really extends the town centre as far as the Western Warehouse, which is adjacent to the silk mill, and that's it. And all the rest is residential. And we don't think that is seizing this opportunity to properly extend the town centre. And central to that expansion is employment space. So we're looking at 11,000 square metres of employment and community space that can be, used by businesses and new businesses coming to Frome. So we know that there's an issue, in Mendip's local plan from 2014, the biggest challenge facing Frome is that it has become, a dormitory town with people going out to other places to work. And the town council, the Chamber of Commerce, I think have researched that there's a demand for employment space. There's waiting lists across town. And Frome has become a bit of an incubator, particularly of maker businesses and other startup businesses, which get to a certain size and then leave the town with that employment. And we think that's just a massive opportunity lost. And this is the one time when we can really seize that opportunity. And I think employment space also really should be in the town centre. It's where those businesses want to be located. And that's how we generate, a lively town centre with lots of weekday footfall for the other businesses within the town. Also, affordable housing, we're doing less homes than Acorn because it is a town centre site in our eyes, but we're going to go above the policy requirement of 30% affordable housing. Distinctive residential neighbourhoods. And, you can see from this image, this isn't a grid. This is, retaining the historic buildings and the carbon within them, but also then generating from that a more, characterful and interesting development with different, walkways and passages, which is reflective, I think, of the rest of the town centre. Preservation of historic buildings, as I mentioned, community-owned assets. So trying to make sure that there's a lot of space that will then be owned by the community in perpetuity to put to use as they see fit, including a Lido hotel and other ancillary space around the Western Warehouse. Public squares, green infrastructure, pedestrian priority by putting car parking at the edge of the site and truly, pushing the cars out of the centre so that people can walk freely. Right, I think that's probably as much as I can cover within my allocated time. So what's the model that we're trying to adopt in developing the Saxon Vale site? And the first thing is to say, we probably need to compare it against the traditional model, which Acorn and countless other developers adopt across the country. And it is a vehicle for capital and for return on shareholder investment. So they're looking to maximize profit, developer profit. And the way to achieve that primarily is minimizing those things that might be of community value that are of lower commercial value, such as employment space, community facilities, and affordable housing, and minimizing risk to do that. And so a lot of, a huge amount of profit leaves the town, and we think it's quite extractive. So, the people in this room and the rest of the community of Frome have built a place that people want to live, that people want to come to, and developers are coming in and benefiting and extracting the value that has been created by others. And we think that's, reflective of a broken model, and things should be done differently. So we want to take a different approach, and we're aligned with Stories on maximizing community value and being ambitious in what we can deliver within the site. And that means minimizing developer profit and maximizing opportunities throughout the development. So we're absolutely going to need still underlying equity and capital to finance the scheme. And Stories have access to a range of social impact equity providers. And those equity providers are much more flexible in how their equity is deployed and how profits are shared and other aspects, which means we should be able to push the profit level down from around 20% to much more like 10%. We've got an equity light scheme, but the whole thing's got to operate within the envelope and the constraints of viability. All of our build costs have been independently assessed. And we've taken some reasonable assumptions within our model. So as an example, we think we're incredibly well placed as the largest community-led development in the UK, if not further afield, to get a lot of grant funding, particularly around the community assets that we're looking to develop. But we've included no assumptions around gaining grant funding in our model. We're also going to look to launch a community bond, which will give local people and others the opportunity to invest in the scheme at a capped 5% return, which will enable us to deliver a lot more within the scheme. but we've assumed nothing in terms of, gaining that. So we're starting from the outset, with a viable scheme with some reasonable assumptions. But of course, it's a large scheme. We don't know exactly how things are going to go, but I think there's every reason to think things could get better in that respect. We've also taken some recent actions to, I think, Mark, you'd raised in a previous meeting around, what are the public realm costs and maintenance and ongoing. So we've had those independently assessed and fed into our model. And there's also been, I think, a fair bit of discussion around the Lido. It seems to become a very hot topic in town. So we've also commissioned an independent consultant to produce a business plan based on data from Lidos across the Southwest, which is showing a small surplus, including a reserve for year-on-year contingency. So, we want to be ambitious at all points and maximize the opportunity, but we've got to also be realistic, and we recognize that, and we've got to take it step by step. So that's a bit of an update on the plan, bit of an update on where we are, because I'm sure there's certainly, if not in this room, a general confusion as to where we've got up to, or kind of went a bit quiet, I think some people have said to us. And the reality is that we've been trying to get through these final hurdles to get to planning board and get planning permission. So a lot of some of the consultees, particularly highways, education and ecology, have responded quite late in the day, and we've had to then respond to those comments and go through an iterative process. But we think we're there. I am 95% sure that we're going to go in the August 17th planning board. And we'll look to confirm that early next week, and we'll put out a statement to kind of confirm that hopefully that's going ahead. And should we get planning permission, then the next step will be to then look to sit down with Mendip District Council and discuss the purchase of the site. And we understand that they are pausing and they are waiting for us to go to planning board and to then sit down with us to do that. And we're going to approach, if we get to that stage, we're going to approach that discussion in a positive way. We think there's absolutely a win for both sides, and see if there's a deal that can be structured, which benefits both sides and their constituents. So that's my broad update. How do I do for time?
Well within your time. You've got 3 minutes left, but that's okay.
No, I'll stop.
We can do that. Thanks. That's really, really good update. Thanks for that. Any questions? Jess, can you pop on the microphone, Jess?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm really intrigued to hear about the getting local people to buy into the scheme and having those types of things available. I'm just fascinated to know, as and when you make decisions about how that's going to work, how smaller amount people will be able to actually invest, just to make it as feasible for as many people as possible to get involved in that, so that it just doesn't end up being people that are wealthy and able to invest large amounts.
Oh, we'll be looking at circa 50, 100 pounds a minimum, something of that order.
Amazing.
Yeah, because that's absolutely what we want. Yeah.
Fabulous. Mel.
I've dealt with Mendip Council for several decades.
Yeah.
And the rejoicing at their demise. I like to call myself Mendip Slayer, but I think that's probably going a bit far. The thing with this scheme that always puts me off is how are you going to stitch it together? Because Mendip overpaid for the land in the first place. Mendip overpaid for the land in the first place. That's obviously a significant aspect in terms of your costs. And they're obviously in some kind of agreement, whether it's contractual or otherwise, with Acorn, and they've received government grants to clear the site. So I like what you're saying. I'm feeling we're going to get to the end of this and they're going to say, nah, we're going to get £10 million off them and we're going to get 6 million off you.
Yeah.
We don't care what the people in Frome say, so let's just go ahead and do it while we can before we go out of existence. So what can you tell me that will make me feel a little bit more comfortable?
Let's give it a go. So first of all, the Homes England grant is for any scheme. So it's the remediation of the site. And in fact, I think they've said something publicly on those lines. So I don't think that's any impediment to our scheme. They absolutely do have a contract with Acorn that they're not executing at the moment. So that's their decision. So they've decided to wait and talk to us. And I think that tells you something at least. We've looked at the contract to the extent that we can, and it is fairly well redacted. But we think there will be options there and a deal to be done. And in terms of, the financial offer, we think the net present value of our scheme over the long term, particularly around the employment space and the income that would be generated and the economic growth, that our scheme is actually of a higher value than what they've got on the table from Acorn. And we've said openly and communicated to them that we're not, we're not looking for a crazy discount. We're looking to pay them a fair land value with a fixed land value, underwritten and guaranteed, and a profit share in exactly the same structure as Acorn have. So we think that overall, they'll get best consideration from us and they'll deliver what their constituents need. And we're looking forward to sitting down in a room with them and explaining how they can achieve all of those things. But I don't know how they're going to approach that discussion because I've not had a discussion with them yet. And you've got clearly much more experience of having those discussions, as you alluded to. But yeah, we're going to engage with it positively. And I think there will be an overriding rationale that this is the scheme that Frome wants as a starter for 10. This is the one that deals with their needs. This is the one that is policy compliant, addresses the local plan that they themselves have written, and delivers best consideration for their land. So I'm not saying there aren't complexities to unpick there, but I think they can be overcome.
That was your question, Mel. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks.
Yeah, very briefly. Thanks again, Paul. Great presentation. I think something we're talking through in the local council is this issue around social value. And I think, hopefully Mendip and Somerset will recognise that this is more than just about the bottom line initially. It's the social value of a scheme like this to a town that, gets more employment, opportunities for young and old and all sorts to work. And so its actual value is more than just the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so we're approaching it in the way that I just discussed, that this is, I think, financially even the better scheme for them. But yeah, I mean, this is also their role. These are the local constituents, and I understand, the cynicism about their view that might exist. But we're going to have to approach that, presuming at least that is their interest, and that the well-being of their citizens and what their citizens need is at the forefront of their mind. I think they'll have to explain why they take a different road if that's not the conclusion they come to.
Thank you. Steve.
Well, thanks, Sarah. Would you say, Paul, that the fact that Mendip have paused the Acorn part of it and now seem to be willing at some point to sit down with you seems to be a pretty positive development, because as far as I'm aware, they haven't actually engaged with you at all up until now. Would that be correct?
That's correct. So yeah, we've made multiple attempts, and yeah, there's been no engagement directly. But we're led to understand that they are waiting for us to go to planning board and to then sit down with us. And you've got to take that as a positive situation, because right now the Section 106 for the Acorn scheme is ready to go. And it's not gone. So, and I think that is reflective that I'm not sure it's a politically tenable route to take at the moment, because Frome's been crystal clear in its preference between the two schemes.
Thank you. Is that okay, Steve? Any questions on the board, Rachel? Any other questions for Paul? Marvellous. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item 4 is a discussion on the cost of living crisis and our response as a council. And this is going to include a brief presentation from Iona. Kate is going to introduce this section. Mel is going to introduce this section.
Okay. You have to bear with me because I'm halfway through a cataract operation, so I can't see anything out of either eye. Well, maybe they should make me king, in the land of the blind. I never thought I'd be talking on this subject. This makes me outraged in terms of the cost of living and what's happening to ordinary people. And I suspect that the increase in poverty that we're going to find over the next 5 years, which is the length of this administration, is going to take a lot of time, a lot of our resources, and we may have to shift around in terms of what we do as a town council. As you'll hear later from Iona, nowadays it's not just the long-term unemployed, those people who are struggling, but people who have work, maybe it's 1, 2, 3 jobs. And those people who just can't make ends meet and are going to find it even more difficult in the future. And there are loads of stats already in this report, and we'll be collecting some more. A lot of people never thought they would be in that position. And some of them, their life history doesn't lead them to be able to deal with this immediately. So they're going to really struggle. What can we do? Well, we're a parish council. We can only scratch the surface, and maybe it's not even that in parts. But I think we should feel obliged to do something. In the same way that not so many years ago, the council launched Frome, which has been a resounding success. And actually the way we did it is to move it out of the council and use volunteers and a new board, but we do support them financially as so does the rest of the town. What I imagine we will do is just find out what are the issues, because I don't think that's been properly identified yet. What are the issues across the town? Find out who's doing what now, because things have changed, and the CAB are here tonight, and great, and thank you for coming. But there are lots of other people involved in these kind of fields, and the last thing we want to do is to be stepping on anybody's toes or repeating work. And then we're looking for the gaps. Where are the gaps? Where are people falling through those gaps, and what does it mean? And then perhaps most important of all, we've got to start asking the people who are currently involved whether some of the solutions that we and others might be coming up with are actually the appropriate ones for them. Because we can sit here all day here, and quite a few of us in here would be able to write beautiful strategies, which are worth bugger all at the end of the day. So we've got to make sure that we do that scoping exercise, and that we keep our heads to the ground, that we don't lose sight of something that says let's get rid of all poverty in 5 years' time, because that isn't going to happen. So what we're going to do is to find small ways forward, things that we can work with other people that don't cost too much, and that's what we need to do as a town council. So you're going to hear this evening from Iona, from the CA. It's not the CAB any longer, is it? Okay. All right. It just goes to show I'm dated. And then Kate's going to talk about what we might do. We're going to break the room up a little bit, and people are going to discuss things. This is not to find the solution. We will not come up with solutions this evening. This is just a start of where we want to be. It'll throw up some ideas. It'll set some thoughts moving for all of us. And that's where we want to be, and there will be a group looking at this in particular, made up of officers and of councillors from here to start things rolling in a fairly big way. So that's my introduction, and I think over to you, Iona.
Thanks, Mel. Thanks, Iona.
Thank you. Do I have to click this to get my slides? Thank you. While that's coming, I'm Iona. I'm a supervisor at Citizens Vice Mendip, which means I manage on certain days, manage the quality of the advice that's being given, mainly by volunteers. So we're a voluntary organisation, we're a charity. A lot of people think we're a government organisation, we're not. And at the moment we have about 45 volunteers, a lot of them local, quite a few live in Frome or around the villages in Frome. Very experienced, wonderful people that dedicate a lot of time to helping our local people that are in dire straits at the moment, especially. What do I just do that? Brilliant. So this is just, people always love to see stats, and our system is really good at drawing out stats on the clients that we see. This is the 6 months to June, to the 30th of June. And this is the whole of Mendip. So obviously we cover right down from Street, Glastonbury, Wells, Shepton. It's difficult to see. I will email this to you, and you can always ask me for specific stats as well if you want. But what you'll see from here is that out of the top 15 wards that are for the clients that we see or help, 5 of them are in Frome. And it's always the case that Frome Keyford and Frome Market wards are in our top 3. You look back throughout the years and it's always been the same. And then you've got Frome Park a little bit further down, and at the bottom, Oakfield and Berkeley Down. And altogether, about 35% of our Mendip clients are from Frome. So, there's a lot of poverty in Frome. It's often hidden and people don't realise that there's a lot of deprivation, because generally the clients we help, not always, we do get people calling us about their neighbour's tree or something, but nowadays the majority of people that call us are calling us about very complex issues. Now, this is a completely useless slide because you can't see any of it, as I realized because I screenshotted it. I'm not very good at PowerPointing. But I will email you this because it's really interesting Frome-based stats. So this is just Frome in the last 6 months. But in the next slide, I have kind of highlighted some of the things that those graphs show, which is that in the last 6 months, we helped nearly 600 residents with just over 2,000 issues. And what that shows you is that these days people aren't coming to us with one issue, they're coming to us with multiple issues. So for example, someone might phone us and be under threat of eviction. So we will be giving them housing advice and advice on their housing rights, but then, they may be evicted because of rent arrears. So we'll be giving them debt advice as well and support with their debts. And then we dig down into why they're in debt, and it may be because their welfare benefits have been cut. So we give them advice about their benefits. So, and the benefit system is increasingly complex and really hard to deal with. And that's where our very experienced volunteers are really important to us. 60% of the Frome clients declared long-term health conditions or disabilities. So that's, our clients do struggle with, especially with mental health, we're finding. And it's a real barrier for people to be able to deal with these very complex systems, which is why they need our help. And 75% of these 600 clients that we saw from Frome in the last 6 months came to us for help with their benefits. Again, just reiterating how difficult it is for people on benefits, and especially if you're disabled. So access to PIP, really, really hard. We spend a lot of time appealing PIP decisions and overturning really poor decisions from the DWP. Debt, big issue, going to become more of an issue, and by far the biggest debt issue that we see is council tax arrears. It's a real problem, multiple reasons. Obviously council tax is really high. If you're working, you have to pay, you maybe don't get any discounts through the benefit council tax support, but if you're just living on benefits on a very low income, you still have to pay 20% of your council tax bill. Didn't used to be like that. A lot of these problems that we're seeing are as a result of the welfare reforms that have been happening over the last 10, 15 years in austerity. But on the positive, because we do so much work on benefits, just in the last 6 months, we underreport massively, so it will be more than this. We've secured £100,000 worth of extra income for Frome residents just in that 6 months, just mostly through access to new benefits. Maybe they didn't realise they were entitled to universal credit if they're working, or PIP if they're disabled. And also through a lot of appeals. So we go right through to the tribunal stage. It's a very long process getting PIP. It can take up to 18 months. And debt write-offs as well. That figure is very low. It will be more. Reporting is always, we always underreport what we do. What's next? A little word on housing, because people are always very interested in this. I would urge you to visit the Home Finder Somerset website. For those, you may all know this already, but it's the guy who works for Somerset County Council called Warren is doing some really good data. He produces every quarter, he produces the stats on social housing allocations, and it's really enlightening, and it's really important for you as councillors to understand where the need is and how desperately we need social housing. It's it's one of the causes of a lot of deprivation, especially in Frome with rents so high. Benefits do not cover private rental amounts sufficiently, but they do if you're in social housing. So, and there's not enough social housing. So you'll see that there are currently 2,000 households. This is just for Mendip. If you need Frome statistics, you can probably ask Warren for them so you can dig down into Frome. But Mendip wide, there's 2,000 households waiting for social housing. And in the 6 months from January to June, only 177 homes, social housing homes were let. So you can see a discrepancy. And then here, these stats, you can see how the comparison between the number of people that needed 1-bedroom homes, over 1,000, and the number of allocations was, well, I'm guessing that's around about 100, isn't it? So, and then 2-bedroom, if you need a 3-bedroom home, less people need them, at nearly 300, but look how few people get allocated a 3-bedroom home. They just aren't out there. Interesting, tying in with, the need, where the need is. And, there is more social housing in Frome than there is in other areas, which is linked into the reason that there's a lot of deprivation and poverty in Frome. So, houses there is positives that people are being rehoused, but there's just not enough. The other thing with housing I was going to mention while you were talking about solutions, I just noted down that, we see a lot of people that aren't able to cover the costs of moving house. And we had a small grant allocation from the Somerset Community Foundation called the Moving In Grant, and it's been brilliant. These small amounts so we can pay for a man with a van to help move people that are on benefits that literally, they may secure their social housing, but how on earth are they going to get their goods moved in? So that was a really good little pot that's almost run out. So that might be a nice idea for you to look into. There are gaps. We can talk about that later. And just to wrap up, what do we do? So our main thing is income maximization at the moment. It's really, we are seeing desperate people. Our advisors are getting people, on the phone in tears a lot, and really scared as well. They're really scared about how they're going to continue, because also it's not a short-term thing. This is stretching into the future, So, a small income game, us identifying that someone is entitled to maybe an extra 30, 50 pounds a week makes a difference between being able to, not have to go to the food bank or not. And, we work really closely with Frome. They're fantastic. I can't praise them enough. And, we do work closely with them. And the thing that we try to do is not just to refer people to food banks when they phone us asking for that. We dig into why are they asking? What is the problem here? What's going wrong? How can we either reduce your outgoings or maximize your income? And we work holistically with others. So as mentioned before, there's some great agencies around, we work with Health Connections and the Village and Community Agents and Frome, and all sorts of people. They refer into us now and we refer out to them. So that's been a real bonus after the pandemic, is that everyone's working more closely together. We have the local assistance scheme funded by Somerset County Council, where we can give crisis top-up energy top-ups for people with prepayment meters. So, we get people out. This afternoon had someone calling saying, their lights were going to go out. If you're on a prepayment meter, you run out of money, you can't, that's it. Your lights will go out. So they can call us and we can give them a voucher to top up their energy. And it can be quite generous depending on how many people are in the household. And purchase of white goods and things like that. But Frome do that as well. So there's a bit of overlap between us and Frome about that scheme. And at the moment, we're trying to extend our advice service. So, we're aware that the face-to-face service closed, very sadly, but actually we're helping just as many people. And I think we're giving a better service. I was very skeptical about the loss of face-to-face, but managing it, I can see what a good, actually we're kind of giving a more holistic service to people. But we've got ideas, access points and advice kiosks are coming. We're in talks with lots of venues in Frome. People have been wonderfully inviting to us. It's been very heartening. And battery's running low. And so our advice line service, which is how people get hold of us on the phone, is free phone. We've got more staff coming, and soon we're going to extend the hours that we're open. At the moment it's 10 till 4, but we're looking to extend that. We've got various specialist advisors that work for us, and one is doing some great stuff, just dealing with Mender District Council issues, capita. It's, there's a lot of issues around that. So council tax debt and council tax support. And yeah, that's me. Just to wrap up, yes, it is desperate. It is a really worrying time for us. We've always helped people that are struggling, but now what's happening is that we're helping people. It's just exploding. It's just more and more. And an example, I spoke to a client yesterday who was a repeated user of the Frome food bank, and we wanted to understand why this was happening, because her husband was working full time. She had been working 12 hours a week, but was signed off sick. And that's an example of someone, and they had to use the food bank. They just simply didn't have enough money, and we looked at their budget. There was nothing they could cut back on, and it was a very emotional call, as it often is, but she ended the call actually shedding tears, but of relief, because I was able to tell her that there was support there for her. There was, the cost of living payments coming from the government. Anyone on universal credit is going to get that in the next couple of weeks, £324. Another one in the autumn, £400 grant in the autumn as well through the energy rebate. And we've been able, and the household support fund as well now is open. The second lot of that, we're not administering it this time, but it's still open to help people get supermarket vouchers and energy top-ups. So rays of hope out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Iona. That's interesting and distressing in equal measure. Over to you, Kate, I think we're going to break up into some workshop groups, are we?
We're going to. I just wondered if anybody had any questions for Iona before we carry on.
Hi.
Adam, did you have your hand up, Adam? Who's that? John? Yeah.
Can I?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask, we're hearing that more and more people are coming to you, and more people are really struggling with their bills and debts. And some of those people aren't on benefits. You just mentioned one. So have you any stats about the numbers of people that previously wouldn't have needed to come to you, wouldn't have needed to seek support for financial debts or for food or whatever it might be, but are now having to do that? Can you provide any information about that?
I don't think we can dig down that deep, but we can, you get a sense, don't you, anecdotally, and you just get an instinctual sense that that's what's happening. I don't think we can pull out figures of how many people are in work. I think Frome might be able to, in their stats, for people that use the food bank. So you could check with them. But no, we can't. We can get a lot of details, age ranges and health and disability and what people have come to us about. But whether they're working or not working, no.
In the John, in the paper, there's a link to the Joseph Rowntree minimum income calculator, and it gives you a really good idea of what the minimum income that families need or individuals need. And it's much higher than you would expect it to be before you kind of fall into those categories of needing additional support. But the benefits don't necessarily come up to meet those thresholds. And I think that's particularly relevant in Frome, as you said earlier, with the house prices being so high,
yeah,
and various other costs being relatively high, but actually incomes in this area being comparatively low. So you can see how those discrepancies are ever increasing at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a kind of gradual eroding of. I think welfare benefits used to cover the basics. So they used to cover people's rent, their council tax, and enough to pay their bills. And it just simply isn't the case anymore. I could talk for hours about the welfare benefit cuts, but now it's not the place. But there's many, many, many factors. And it's, created a perfect storm that people do not get given enough to live on.
Can I just ask you about the thresholds for free school meals? Because we know that there are about 926 children in this area, but when you try and find out the exact threshold, the financial income threshold for free school meals, it's a bit of a minefield.
I can look it up for you.
I didn't know if you'd
bring
know
my-
it.
I didn't bring my welfare.
Oh, that's
rights book
fine.
like I
It
did
looked
last
like
talk. I couldn't-
it looked like it was a family income of £16,000, which was extraordinarily low
Yeah,
as a threshold. And I just wondered if you knew more.
yeah. No, I can let you know, not off the top of my head.
Thank you,
I believe
everyone.
you asked a question I didn't know the answer to.
Adam, quick question.
Hello. Hi. Yeah. You mentioned council tax debt is still the main source of debt. Now, years ago, we pushed Mendip, and I'm Mendip District Councillor, pushed Mendip to adopt the protocol for council tax collection, and agreed that with Ian.
Yes.
At CAM years ago, because there was evidence of Capita's bailiff companies chasing vulnerable people who couldn't pay council tax, and then they were going to the credit union to borrow money to pay council tax debt that actually they didn't really need to pay because they were vulnerable and could get either support or hardship fund or both. So is the protocol working well? Could it be improved? Is there anything that you would recommend Mendip District Council do differently in terms of practice or policy or Capita and their SLA with Capita and so on, that we could help improve that? Because I worked on this a lot years ago and I've left it. I need to review it potentially. Maybe we need a conversation. I don't know.
Well, I'd like to talk to you more about it. I meet every quarter with the officer in charge of revenue and benefits at Mendip, and we have over the last few years become much better at collaborative working. And yes, they signed a protocol, but there are still poor practices. The use of bailiffs with vulnerable people and for very small debts is a big problem. It got, stopped in the pandemic, and they are looking at changing their policies now. The problem with Capita is that it's a very computer says no driven system, and it's very difficult for people to cut through that, which is where our advisor that helps negotiate on behalf of clients comes in. The thing is that with Mendip about to end, we're now concentrating on trying to get the new policies at Unitary set up with that protocol that you've seen, and use that as a basis for best practice in terms of council tax collection. And we're also pushing for 100% reduction for council tax support claimants who are on the lowest incomes, universal credit only, and very low incomes.
Thank
that
you.
will help.
I'll be in touch
I'm
with
working
you,
on that a lot at the moment.
Steve Strimpin, isn't it? Amanda?
Steve,
Yeah.
But he doesn't. I don't know. I need to find out where the power hierarchies are in the new Unitary Council. If anyone knows.
I'm on that too, so I'll talk to you later maybe.
Thanks, Adam. One more question before we move on to the workshops to make sure we've got enough time to do that. Carla.
Actually kind of responding to Adam's point. So I wonder if the Mendip district councillors in the room can push Mendip to make it 100% discount rather than 80% as South Somerset does.
Yeah, I don't know whether, what's the time scale for the Unitary coming in? The policy's already been, everything works with these kind of very long run-in timetables. I don't know whether there's enough time to change the policy before Mendip is no longer, but it'd be good if anyone does have influence. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks, Carla. Okay, thanks again, everyone. Kate.
Thanks. Okay, so we're going to look at 4 topics now on tables, on these 4 tables. So Andy, I'm going to ask you to move and join a table in a sec. But just before we do that, I thought somebody said to me recently about their own experience, and it just summed up the lived experience of somebody in Frome and what the cost of living crisis meant to them. They are a family, they have 2 small children. Her partner has got a job a bit further south, so he has to travel every day, and he's taken a bit of a reduction in wages as a result of the change in job. But obviously the cost of fuel going up is having an impact on their income and what they're essentially bringing home at the end of every month. And she said, but it's okay because I can give up my yoga class. Now that sounds like a really middle class thing to do, but actually the knock-on impact of that for me is quite significant. I have a really bad back, and going to yoga once a week means I haven't been to the GP and asked them for a prescription for the painkillers that they tried to give me 6 months ago, but I'll have to do that. So I'll have to start taking painkillers and regularly checking in with the GP. She said it's also my space. It's where I go for my own mental health, which makes me a better mum, and I can deal with my partner being out of the house from 7:30 in the morning to 6:30 at night and trying to wedge my job in between that and deal with 2 small children. She said, but actually the thing I'm really, really worried about is the yoga teacher, because if I stop going to the yoga class and all of my colleagues in that yoga class stop going, then what happens to her? How does she feed her family? So yes, on the face of it, it's a really lovely middle class thing to do, but actually the knock-on impact for all of us is really quite significant. And when you're looking at this in the context of Frome, we know we have relatively low unemployment. We do have a ward, the Trinity ward of Frome is really significant in areas of multiple deprivation across the county. But we have relatively low unemployment, but we have a high number of sole traders, people who are self-employed and people working on 0 hours contracts. And an arts industry and a music industry and a well-being industry that essentially it encompasses all those nice to do things. So actually us stripping back some of those nice to do things has an enormous economic impact on the town and a personal impact on a much wider group of residents. And I think that's the context with which we're looking at all of this tonight alongside, you know, what's happening, what's the lived experience for people who are already in the benefit system, and that gap is getting bigger and bigger. So we are going, the 4 topics that we think are most pertinent for us to discuss are food, and I suggest that this table here looks at food, housing, and I'm going to suggest that the second table talks about housing, income for the third table, and then how have I forgotten the fourth? Fuel, of course it is. Fuel on that table over there. And if you're not part of a table, please do join one. I'm going to give you some flip charts and some pens. Please take some notes, and we will have about 12 minutes for this conversation. If you think we need longer at the end of that, we'll keep going. But then what I'd like you to do is on your table, agree 3 things that you're going to feed back. We'll gather all the notes in afterwards. So 3 really quick, small, punchy headlines from each table. Sound okay? Yep. Right.
So I'll give you a few minutes heads up when we're going to wrap up the conversations, and then I guess nominate someone to feedback from your table. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Nick, what was the question? 12 minutes for discussion, and then oh, it's half an hour was allocated. Oh, plenty, half an hour. Yeah, yeah.
So what I didn't say was there's some questions to help you focus the conversation, and they're on the ball. I don't think I need to read them out, but somebody from each table just keep a track of those questions just to help you focus the conversation.
Thanks, Kate. So as Kate said, you've got about 12 minutes. I'll give you a 2-minute heads up. Yeah. All going smooth.
You look a bit exhausted today, Sam. Sorry, that's not. I feel like I've hardly seen you, to be fair, in the last couple of weeks. People are saying that it's so much worse. They're getting it so much worse. Well, you were, it was your first time, maybe. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would really struggle. Enjoying food. Oh, that's good. Quite smell things. I think the reason Mel likes having the windows open. Yeah. We've been told about some point we could just quietly say that. See it run off. Got on a timer. Maybe it's on a timer, so it automatically goes. That's so annoying. Got too cold. And then yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Quite hard though, isn't it? When you think you've got it. Yeah, what's happened? Well, the co-hosts now. Is that Zoom? Yeah, they have changed. Something happened earlier. A co-host renamed somebody. I was trying to rename myself instead of Sarah Williams. Very aroused. Give it to live. You can't plug it into Amplify. I don't. I mean, if they didn't work, but in the next we had to. Oh, was it? Oh, that's so disappointing. In the other rooms. Yeah, because you can feel it. I mean, just being in there having a normal meeting, it's never comfortable. Did they have their meeting hall then? Yes. Really for it, really. Brilliant. They did on that. We went home. My mum was here early anyway. I know. When he's healthy, he's healthy. No, only that he wasn't going to be on Monday. On Monday morning, he said I won't be there. Well, basically said I won't be there on Thursday. He told Laura, he told us in the email that maybe he felt worse. He felt yeah. People get it so differently, don't they? What's the second time he's had it? I don't remember him being positive. Oh no.
Yeah, yeah, and now he's happier. Okay, start making your final notes and getting ready to feedback. 1 more minute. That was an interesting chat. Make sure you've nominated someone from each table to give your feedback. Okay, thank you, everybody. Back over to Kate.
So have you nominated somebody to feedback and you've got 3 quick points to feedback?
Can everybody stop talking? We're going to do some feedback now. Thanks, Kate.
Mr. Clark. Right, okay, so which table would like to start with the feedback? Should we start with food? You've got 3 quick points that you want to tell us all. We're going to collate everything, so don't worry if you don't get to feed everything back. We will pull it all together.
So yeah, looking at the questions, I think one of the 3 points is in terms of capturing data, and also I think in terms of partnering, we thought Frome was a really good partnering organisation for this, particularly because we think just now there's an increase in demand for the services, but also there's a decrease in donations. So this could be quite a quick way of getting some quantitative information. In terms of engagement, we thought there was 2 different approaches. So the second point would be engagement out in the community. So going out and about the community, not trying to invite people to the town hall, which can be off-putting. So maybe going out to cafes in the area, community centres up at the Mount, and engaging with people in their neighbourhoods. And then the third point would also be trying to engage with people through professional services, in particular highlighted from your presentation, that connection with medical needs and the need for help. So engaging with the Frome Medical Centre and also trying to encourage them to open a talking cafe there again.
Great, thanks very much. This table here.
Yeah, we talking about housing. So I mean, the major thing here is that we definitely need more housing. I mean, that's the major issue behind it all. We know that there are 600 approximately households awaiting social housing on Mendip's housing list. The various partners that we could have a greater understanding from that might feed into this would be maybe the new Frome Rental Alliance that's been working, the Fair Housing for Frome, the faculty guys. I know we're on the Fair Housing for Frome, there was a housing needs survey, albeit a fairly smallish sample, but all that data would help. But very much anecdotal evidence as well is we can pick up through maybe the notice boards on Fair Housing for Frome, because a lot of people talk about the need they have now for different sizes of house. Fair Frome would probably have an awful lot of information on that side of things as well. So there are quite a few places we could go to for information, for anecdotal evidence, but the people that we might look to work with would be the unitary guys, working with the new council, making sure that we understand that get as much data as possible, but making sure also that any housing that's built or any policies that are produced take into consideration local needs first and foremost. So these houses that are built should be for local people as much as possible. Using the LCN for lobbying and influencing in those quarters as well would probably be a very useful source. But a lot of it is going to require more working with developers and putting more pressure on local developers for the right amount of social housing, to keep increasing the percentage as far as possible and making sure we've got the right type of housing for those people out there. And engaging with the public is very much would be on our consultation basis where possible, presumably going through people like Fair Frome or those people who like the citizens' advice, anyone who has contact with those people who are in this position would be the right people to talk to.
Great, you definitely extended that 3 points then, that table. And, what I haven't heard from these two tables is what's the data, particularly, I don't think, that we actually need to go and find. So if either of these two tables have any thoughts on that, do scribble them down on the bits of paper. So 3 points.
I can't guarantee that. What do we know? You mentioned low unemployment, but low pay for a rural economy, so that's always low pay. We know that Trinity Market Ward is in the lowest 20% in the country. Increasing demands on income, fuel is going up, energy going up, travel from Frome to work. I think is it 60% of the town leaves Frome every day to work. So that's a huge point on that. And housing, of course, as Anita mentioned, one of the disbenefits of being the most popular place in the country to live. Data we can talk about. Stories, we can find stories from Fair Frome if they redact the information they've got, local groups, church groups, youth groups, schools, and lots of different partners already mentioned, including Usual Suspects Plus Job Centre, Living Round Foundation, Living Wage Credit Unit. But engagement is coordinate all the other organisations in Frome already doing this work. I already and others go to something called SANG, which Fair Frome organise, which is all the local support networks of everybody working in the town. That could be expanded, and certainly the town council could have a member on that board to take a feel for what's actually going on in the town.
Thank you very much. So fuel, energy.
Yeah, we took it to be fuel and energy. Point about the fact that we're highly dependent on private cars due to lack of public transport infrastructure, mitigated a little bit by co-wheels and e-bike rental, but nowhere near enough. Wondering whether there's a way to facilitate some sort of informal car sharing schemes, since most cars seem to spend most of their lives parked at the roadside, causing traffic jams, which leads to fuel inefficiency anyway. We talked about energy efficiency in homes. A couple of points there. One is that although there is CPC data available, it's a fairly broad brush and not necessarily recent. So there may be a need actually to get out and about on doorsteps or in cafes trying to find out where the real problems are. And also maybe trying to create a trusted source of information for people versus all the various spam calls that we all get from companies trying to sell us things that we should really get for free.
Excellent.
One final thing in terms of source of stories, there is a Frome Renters Alliance event tomorrow night at the Cheese and Grain, focusing on how renters and landlords can help to make their properties a bit more sustainable and a bit more energy efficient. So we should be able to gather some interesting anecdotes from there and from CAM themselves.
Thank you very much. So the prize for feedback definitely goes to the food table tonight. And next steps, Mel, did you want to finish us off in this discussion? I think we're definitely going to take away all of these bits of paper, collate that. And my understanding is that there's a group of councillors who have a focus.
There's been 5 or 6 councillors, I suspect, actually leading on this from the town council. But really, the job is to be talking to everybody else in town, and then to be producing something. But you know, I wonder whether we're missing the point. We should be actually making people out there angry. This is fundamentally wrong. And the living dead who are trying to become leader of the Conservative Party now do not mention this at all. And I just think that we need to be saying this is not right, and we should be using the local newspapers, and we should be using our own website to start saying things like that, because there's nothing wrong with that. Until we get people agitated, they're not going to be able to help one another, and that's where it's good. That's where some of this is going to change, and we need to change as a council in terms of planning. We need to say we're going to prioritise affordable housing, and that might come above some of the environmental issues that we really love and we really want to put into practice. But we need to get a proper measure on this. So that's what we'll be working on, perhaps over the next 2 weeks, 6 months.
Done and dusted by the end of the summer.
Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Kate. Okay, well, we're keeping well to time. We've got a few more items and some for decision as well. I'd like to try and keep all of these items to 5 or 6 minutes if we can, to make sure we get through them. Agenda item 5 is an update on the project to refurbish the toilets, a long ongoing conversation in Victoria Park, and a decision to whether to invite tenders. And who's leading on this one? Mark. Thank you, Iona. Simmer down.
Right, thank you. Highlight of the evening. Can you all see me standing behind? Thank you. There's no puns intended in this whole speech, but some will slip in. For some years now, the condition of the toilet block in Victoria Park has been unacceptable and a source of complaints from users of the park. Despite the best efforts of our rangers and cleaning staff, they're often unavailable after vandalism and are a site for antisocial behaviour. Even when usable, they're not a nice place to be. In 2017, a people's budget was awarded to replace or refurbish the block. Various alternatives were proposed, all of which were either unaffordable or impractical, and further delays have set in since COVID. It became apparent that we could not afford either the money or the space in the park to start anew. So now we're in the position of refurbishing what we have. All right. So the aims of the refurbishment are to make them more welcoming and accessible, reduce the risk of vandalism and antisocial behaviour, and modernise the design to be in line with best practice and fit for purpose for users of the park. Early this year, Vivian was appointed as a project officer. Thank you, Vivian, for the work you've done on this. She threw herself right into it. And no, and she did, and identified 2 companies specialising in this area of work. There are companies that specialise in municipal lavatories. In May, Vivian and I met 2 representatives of 2 of the companies at the park and explained what we needed. They have come back with some indicative plans, which I'd like to share with you, but they're not very happy about putting it on the screen, so we'll have to sort of more or less explain what we've got. You can see from that picture that the current access is round the back on the Victoria Park side. We know this is dark, dingy, not very welcoming, in fact, unsafe in many ways. And so the proposal is to move it to this side of the block. So within that, imagine, if you will, there'll be 3 doors. Imagine the public lavatories in the cattle market car park, where you have 3 doors. Well, you would have 3 doors. There'll be 2 unisex cubicles for general use and 1 changing places disabled unit on the end, or that end perhaps, for people with those needs. That's what a changing place looks like. It will be accessed. That's very similar to the one in the marketplace. You can see all the stuff that has to be included, all the equipment that has to be included in that to make it suitable for a changing places unit. Accessed by a radar key, which has its own problems, but that's the way that, that's the general way that people who need these places can access this. Within the unisex cubicles, there will be changing facilities in both of them. The fittings will be recessed to try and reduce vandalism. And we would try and use as much of the current kit we've got. For example, the doors on the back cost £3,000 each. We don't want to throw those away. It would be great to try and use as much as we've got to save money and be more sustainable. And on the end, we would have an external water bottle filling station, so people can fill their own water bottles at no charge, and not have to use disposable bottles, we hope. So that's the figures that we've got. Now, within the EMR from the public, from the people's budget was £58,000 was allocated. That's not going to be anywhere near enough for this project now. We can't be specific because we need a tender for this, but the cost is probably going to be anywhere between £80,000 and £120,000. The proposal, what we would like to do is explore whether or not a Public Works Loan Board application would be suitable to finance that project, but we would have to discuss that in council after a tender was made or given or provided, so we would know the exact figures that we're talking about, and then we can actually discuss the amount of money we would wish to raise through a PWLB. So you've seen an original recommendation that's been changed today. So the recommendation I'm asking councillors to look at now, to go out to tender for the refurbishment of Victoria Park toilets and to return to councillors with a proposal for project funding once those costs are known. Does anybody have any questions? Mel, you must have one.
The cafe there is up for retendering.
Yes.
Why don't we just add some of this to the end of the cafe? And I mean, knock down those toilets. They're always going to be in a corner. Doesn't matter which side you put the door on, and actually get the new lessee to look after the toilets, lock them up, open them, clean them, and we won't charge them rent.
We've looked at that. The actual physical movement of the block to the cafe or the cafe towards the block is so cost prohibitive. Remember that when we looked at in 2017, we looked at a Whammo Slammo cafe between the two parks with that cost. Apparently, although EMR £58,000 was set aside for that, when the figures were done, I understand it came in anywhere between £250,000 and £400,000.
The slightly tailored version, which would be no bigger than a reasonable house extension, added on to the existing cafe, would give you a better solution, as good a solution at less ongoing cost.
We are, as you know, we're talking to people who are interested in running the cafe. One of the things we are talking about that is that they will be responsible for the toilets as well. And we're also looking at making sure that the toilets are locked off at dusk every night. So these are all things that details that we can look at. The actual building onto the side of the cafe has not been considered.
Adam?
Thank you. A quick question. Has anyone come back to you from Mendip about the changing places potential for funding?
I understand that someone's been in contact with you.
Yes. I mean, I was wondering if anyone bypassed me and went straight to you. So
I mean, I can answer that. No, I haven't heard anything back from Mendip. And we also went direct to changing places as well.
Okay.
So still waiting.
Okay, I'll make some inquiries.
If you can, we're under the impression that because we already have one in the marketplace, it will be down the list for the ones that are being rolled out across Mendip. And I know that you're involved in the changing places swimming for the leisure centre as well. So we're under the impression that we probably wouldn't expect to get any funding from Mendip.
Glastonbury and Street were top of the list for the funding which has come through, but there's other funding as well identified. And I've been chasing Frome Leisure Centre as well because there's a room available for that there because there's been a power chair club asking for that. So this is probably the fourth on the list.
Exactly.
So it's still needed though. So
that's why we're not holding out much hope, but thank you.
So we need to vote on this recommendation.
Again?
We need to vote on this recommendation.
I'm happy to propose a recommendation. Would anyone want to second it?
Anyone? Andy?
Andy?
So we're voting on the amendment first of all, so, and then voting on the recommendation. So we're voting. So from that original recommendation to the revised recommendation. So is everyone happy with that? Someone say yes to that, Andy? Someone else say yes to that, Anita? Everyone aye or no, nay? That's a match, I think. Yep, great. And so now we're voting on the recommendation, which is to put it out to tender.
You're proposing.
I propose
Mark
the
proposing.
revised recommendation.
Anita seconding. Everyone. Majority. Yep, majority.
you.
Max, you're looking befuddled. So we've accepted the recommendation and now we've voted on that recommendation that it's going to go out. Yeah, yeah. Okay,
We have voted to put this out to tender.
everyone clear? Okay, Marvo. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Councillor Doddington.
Ask that I think we scooted over Mel's thought and basically it's been, you said, Mark, that it's not being considered. This doesn't seem to preclude considering it. Could it be part of the could it be part of the tender?
We haven't instructed or asked.
This project has been going on so long. What you're
Well, it has, which is why
proposing is sort of massive.
you and I have had long conversations
We have
about
had long
why this has gone on
conversations
so
about it.
long. So we wanted to get on with doing something about this.
I know, and
This is probably the quickest and possibly the cheapest way of doing it at the moment.
but we don't. But until it's tendered for, we don't know that it's the cheapest or the quickest, actually. So I'm just wondering whether the two options can be tendered for at the same time, or whether that's just going to be stall things even further. I'd just like you to consider it, please.
Not for me to consider.
The council to consider it then.
Do you think this could be considered?
I guess the details of the invitation to tender are still to be worked out in some detail. But I mean, what you've agreed on tonight is the refurbishment of the existing toilets. For the refurbishment of the Victoria Park toilets. Yeah, I mean, I mean, we can go out to tender. We can get a price. Equally, we could go out to tender on another specification and look at the two together.
And is to speed this up, and if having an addition to the park cafe speeds things up because it's there is a small addition to the that area. If that speeds things up, that would be great. But if this is going to stall it even further, I just can see that this is going to go on forever because it's a 5-star project that you actually got here, and maybe that should be considered.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the difficulty actually in going out to tender on a different proposition at this stage is that there's still a lot of work to be done on that alternative. I mean,
which is fine. We can do that work. I mean, this is just going on. I mean, 2017, somebody voted up this should be done. 5 years later, nothing's been done. So the whole point was trying to get something done to satisfy the need in the park. But I'm quite happy to work with Vivian and others to see if we could attach something to the cafe and make. I mean, the expressions of interest have already gone out to the people who are tendering to work in the cafe. So I don't know, that would have to be changed. That would they would also be responsible for a toilet block. No, Mel, you brought it up. It's a bit ambushed here. I'm thinking on my feet. Thanks for that. But no, we could consider it if we want the Rolls-Royce job. We looked at the Rolls-Royce job before, and it was going to be at least £250,000. So that's not doable, especially at the moment we're talking about cost of living. So
I thought the extending the toilets onto the cafe was not possible because of trees. I mean, maybe that's something we need to revisit, but that's what I was told. But I've come after the project, but
That was also the reason why we didn't do it. I mean, the original plan, if everybody remembers millions of years ago, was to knock down the store between the two parks and replace that with the joint cafe lavatory block. And that was the one that got expensive, and it would need require the removal of at least one big tree, which was deemed to be totally unacceptable. So I think that we face the same problem adjacent to the cafe, but we can look at it. Sorry? Well, yeah.
Maybe what we could do is we could go back and just see how,
make sure that we
have got everything
looked at it
correct.
properly. I'm happy.
We will need to answer this question when we go public, is why couldn't we extend it? So we could go back and just get that.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, swiftly, Anita.
Yeah, I think I'm missing something here, but we're talking about refurbishing this existing building at this cost. If we're talking about building something new next to the cafe, surely that's going to be triple, quadruple the price we're talking about, isn't it? If you're talking about
Possibly, I
building a
don't know. I haven't
brand
done
new
the figures
building
on
again, it just seems, is that we?
The-
All right, okay.
If I can just say that, I mean, this is the point I was trying to make. One of the things that we would have to do is we'd have to look at that proposition from scratch and understand whether it's feasible, what costs are associated with that, before we could think about putting together a specification for an invitation to tender. And as we speak, we don't have that information at our fingertips. Although the likelihood is that the trees in the park will be a constraint. That's certainly been considered to be a constraint in the past.
Well, it was in the previous thing that we looked at. It would be very simple for Chris and or others to look at site and work out if it would be doable at all.
Okay, Anita.
So, just to say, from a personal perspective, I'm all for looking at options, but it strikes me this has been going on for a long time. We've got a really good proposal put in front of us now. If we're talking to the cafe new leasees about maintaining the toilets and looking after them, etc., sounds as though we've got quite a good setup with this, and it feels as though anything else that we reconsider might be so much money. And we're not really into spending any more money than we really want to at this stage over this 5-year period. I think we're going to have to spend enough on other things coming up. So my recommendation would be to stick with this, but that's a personal view.
Thank you, Anita. So are we all still agreed on what we just voted on? We need to do it again. Okay, good. Thanks. Thanks, Councillor D. Nick Dove on deciding whether to introduce a cycle to work scheme for councillors.
I'll spare you all standing in front of you. Just briefly, so agenda item 6. This is for a decision. It's a proposal to offer a scheme that's similar to Cycle to Work for councillors. The purpose of this report is to seek approval for the introduction of a scheme that will enable councillors to rent an e-bike that allows them to get around town and connect with their constituents. They could then buy this at the end for a nominal sum after either a 2 or 3 year period. Very briefly, as we all know, Frome Town Council is committed to tackling the climate emergency. Part of its plan is to actively encourage people to walk and cycle around the town. Due to the town's topography, e-bikes have proved to be a very effective way for people to travel around both the inner and outer reaches of Frome. It is a really essential part of a councillor's responsibility to actively engage with constituents in their own wards and across the town. Using an e-bike would increase the mobility of councillors and their ability to move around the town in an efficient and carbon neutral manner. Councillors are not eligible for any of the government schemes such as Ride to Work or the Green Community Initiative, as they're not employees. The proposal is that the Frome Town Council facilitates for councillors something similar to the Cycle to Work scheme, which would otherwise only be available to PAYE staff. The scheme would work simply by the Town Council purchasing an e-bike for those councillors who might be interested in this, up to a proposed maximum value of £3,000 to assist councillors in their travel in the community. and they would rent it back to the councillor over a 2 or 3 year period. The rental paid by the councillor over the period would enable them to buy the e-bike from the council for a nominal sum after the 2 or 3 years. Interest that would have been earned by the council fund in the savings account will be taken into account and paid for by the councillor. So as an example of the of this calculation would be £3,000, that's the capital outlay, plus 2% interest per annum, plus VAT on the rental over 36 months, would be a monthly payment of £103, subject to variable interest rates. This financial process has been devised by our business manager, Sarah Williams, and she's had them checked with the Town Council's internal auditor. With a top-end cost of a £3,000 bike and with repayments over a 2 or 3 year period, I believe this is in effect a cost-neutral scheme that will encourage the use of environmentally efficient transport and allow councillors to be more visible and effective in their roles. And I'd also suggest that part of the scheme would be that the e-bike should be bought from a local independent business.
Thanks, Nick. Questions? No, no questions.
If it could
Carla.
help, somebody did ask me how many councillors out of the 70 would be interested. Maximum 4, probably 3.
Carla.
You might have explained it, but maybe I didn't understand. So if people didn't want to buy it, they could just loan it, or is the assumption that it's basically paying a monthly fee and by the end you would own it?
Yes. Yes. So at the end of the period, you'd own the bike.
So the recommendation then is to authorise Sarah, the business manager, to facilitate a cycle to work scheme for councillors' use up to maximum, as Nick just said. I won't repeat it all. Does anyone propose that we accept that recommendation? Nick does. Anyone going to second that? Andy? Everyone in favour of that? Majority, it looks like to me.
Yes.
Yep. Great. Swift. Nicely done. Thanks, Nick. Agenda item 7, Steve. This is to decide members of the planning committee. No.
So, Sarah, yeah, I won't go through the blurb because it's getting late. But yes, just to deputy chair and members of the plenary committee. So the first part, I propose Andy Jones as deputy chair. Anyone else wants to propose anyone for deputy chair? If not, we vote on that.
Yep. Does everyone agree with that? Yep.
Good. Second part, the membership of the planning committee is actually changed because a couple of people dropped out today. So Carla Collinet and Fiona Barrels won't be part of that committee. Peter, if you could, I don't know if we need to vote on an amendment or.
We need to amending that list.
Oh, and Polly's not on there. She's on my. No, you're on page 2. You're on page 2. Calm yourself down. Steady on.
The only requirement is that we have a minimum.
Yeah, there's one more. Polly's
6
on that.
councillors, right?
Yeah, it's just not coming up on the screen, Peter.
Okay.
She's been dropped off.
Yeah.
It's my slide, sorry.
Yeah, so the 6 would be myself, Andy, Mark, Phil, Tracy, and Polly.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So do we need to vote on that? Yeah, I'll propose that.
So I proposed, Steve seconded, and that's also majority. Unanimous.
Thank you. That's it.
Great, thanks, Steve. Agenda item 8, Philip. This is to ratify a decision to nominate a Frome Town Council representative to serve on the Thin Educational Foundation Board. Yeah, everyone's yeah. So Mel proposed, Andy seconded, and that looks unanimous. Yeah, okay, good. Well done, Phil. And then the very last thing is agenda item 9, which is Laura on staff matters.
Yeah, I think the report says it all, but Jill, you had a question about Chris Stringer's role. So at the moment, Paul Wynne, in consultation with Chris, is looking at the best way to go about, and obviously with Sarah as the HR manager, as the best way to go forward. We don't always assume that a like for like is best. We like to explore all of the options that we have available and whether a like for like is the right way to go, or whether we actually create a slightly alternative role, but to still maintain obviously covering Chris's current duties. So we will let you know in due course. But yeah, any questions, let me know.
Questions for Laura? Any other staffing issues, questions?
It looks like that you may not replace Chris Stringer.
Not as in the
overall,
Yes, so the
environmental
environment manager role might not exist in its current format in the way that Chris performs the role. So some of his duties may go to Sarah, some of his duties may go to lead ranger Dave. And then we're exploring what's left and how that role might be covered, just to make sure that actually it's the best fit for the council and the work that we've got coming up. And Sarah,
I can appreciate that, but we need to know who's going to be in charge. You know, when I've got an issue with the Foundry Barton, I need to know who I can access.
We're not telling you.
I'll let Sarah can answer that
So,
one.
I mean, you're so fed up with me anyway, so that's you don't want me to know.
Sarah.
Definitely will. We definitely will let you know who to direct those queries to. Yeah, and I think it's most likely there will be an open spaces manager. It's the other bits that Chris does. You can't replace Chris Stringer. The other bits that Chris does, lots of legal things which I could take on, insurance claims, health and safety, risk assessments, which might be done by somebody else, but open spaces will be a management.
Open spaces what? Sorry.
Open spaces will have a lead.
Yeah, because I used to have, site meetings and the resident site meetings with Chris.
We'll tell you who it's going to be.
Right.
Jill, promise.
Okay.
You'll be the first to know, Jill.
Thank you.
I believe any other questions? I believe then that wraps up council business for this meeting. Nicely done, under time. Well done, everybody. Thank you for your contributions. See you next time.